Accelerating Net Zero Chemical Manufacturing, where today we will be discussing biomass to chemicals. My name is Catherine Julia Mort and I am the lead in IB at KTN, and I will be chairing today's webinar. So before we get started, I would just like to take you through a few housekeeping points so that the webinar runs as smoothly as possible. So all participants will be muted throughout the webinar. Please do use the Q&A box for submitting questions for the speakers throughout the webinar. We'll be going through the questions right at the end. Please do use the chat box for any technical issues with sound or visuals, etc. And just to let you know, the webinar will be recorded and you will be sent the recording link along with any other materials in due course. So at KTN, we create the diverse connections that enable positive change. So our knowledge and expertise enables innovators to transform bright ideas into real-world solutions. Our powerful industry and academic connections can guide entrepreneurs, startups, and companies through the complex challenges of bringing new products, processes, and services to market. So that's essentially why we're here today. So as part of this webinar series, we've already held 3 webinars, one around low carbon infrastructure, one around syngas economy, and the last one was around carbon capture, storage and utilization. So all these recordings are available. So if you'd like to check them out, then please do go to the KTN website where they're all available for you. So we have a great lineup of speakers today, including Ian Archer from IB IOIC, James Highgate from Green Fuels, Stephen Wallace from Edinburgh University, and Sarah Hickenbottom from BioBale. But before we get on to our external presentations, I would like to hand over to my colleague Dana, who will be giving us a little bit more background about this webinar. So Dana, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as Catherine said, my name is Dana. I'm the knowledge transfer manager for synthetic biology at the KTN. So I'm working with innovators in the space of engineering biology, as well as industrial biotechnology. And I want to give you a brief background about how we got to this webinar series and the reasoning behind it. I'm sure you are all aware of the UK's ambition to have net zero carbon emission by 2050. And to really achieve this goal, the chemistry industry has a major role to play in this. So my colleagues, Sheena and Pete, they analyzed the UK landscape to really scope out where we stand in terms of moving chemical manufacturing to net zero. Currently, about 90% of our chemicals are made from crude oil, and this has a massive impact on carbon emission. So we really wanted to understand what kind of capabilities do we have in the UK to move away from petrochemical feedstocks, and also what kind of technologies do we actually have in the UK to really use alternative feedstocks. So we identified 5 key areas which we think are important for achieving net zero chemical manufacturing. And they are low carbon infrastructure, syngas, CCSU, biomass, and waste polymers as a feedstock. And each of those key areas is reflected in our webinar series, with the one today focusing on biomass. So through this landscape mapping exercise, we found that we have really great technology strengths across all those key areas. So we have a really vibrant academic base who does active research and development. We have scale-up capabilities, and also a really vibrant innovator community made up of SMEs and startups who are developing technologies around those key areas. And all this gathered information is summarized in our net zero chemical landscape map, which is available on the KTN webpage. And this landscape map is really a capability map, highlighting and listing all the identified innovators and companies who are working in those key areas. And you can also browse the webpage according by technology, feedstocks, and products. So please have a look at your own time through this landscape map and let us know if there's anything missing. So coming back to the question around what kind of feedstocks are we going to use in 2050? And if you look at the basic production line, we have our feedstocks, which undergo some downstream processing, and we end up with our end product. And as I said at the beginning, at the moment, we are mostly using crude oil, which has a massive impact on carbon emission. And maybe in 2050, we are still at the same point. We are still using crude oil because we have all the technologies developed, and we are good in using these technologies. Or maybe in 2050, we have actually taken some action, and instead of using crude oil, we have focused on improving existing technologies, but also develop new technologies, which really allows us to use alternative feedstocks. And this is highlighted in scenario 2. So here in this scenario, instead of using petrochemicals, we are using carbon dioxide, we are using waste products, and also biomass to really make our products which we are using in our daily life. And I think this move to sustainable feedstocks really allows us to progress in a circular economy. So instead of our end products being dumped in landfill or burned, they are actually re-entering the circular supply chain as a feedstocks. So maybe in 2050, we are having a really circular economy, which is using a mix of feedstocks, sustainable feedstocks, which really allow us to make an impact on carbon emission. So the last point I want to make is around local-based opportunities. We are living in a really strange world at the moment, and local-based opportunities and local supply chains becoming more and more important. And I think it will be even more important in the future, where it is about bringing different technologies, different infrastructures together. And in this example for biomass, the biomass is entering a biorefinery. We are using fermentation technologies to make biobutanol, bioethanol. And then we are bringing in different technologies. So like, for example, carbon capture technologies and hydrogen purification technologies. We can capture the carbon dioxide and store it somewhere offshore. We can use the hydrogen to generate heat and electricity and feed it back into the biorefinery. And then I think for me, as someone who's working in engineering biology and industrial biotechnology, it's really important to bring in those enabling technologies together with existing technologies around electrochemical transformation, to really use the biomass to make our chemicals of the future, and to really develop a sustainable supply chain, which is local. So I think we are having a really great opportunities here to really decarbonize and make an impact. But to realize this opportunity and to make it reality, we really need to understand the value at each of those points, because at the end of the day, we want to make an impact and we want to achieve a positive change. So we really need to understand not only the economic and environmental impact, but also the social impact. I think it's also really important that we identify what kind of molecules we're going to produce in the future, so that our innovators can start building those sustainable supply chains and start getting innovated. I'm already covered briefly the local opportunity. And as I said, I'm sitting between industrial biotechnology and engineering biology. And I think it's really important to bring different technologies together. I really would like to see an uptake of EB and IB in the chemistry industry to really make an impact on net zero. And this is one of the reasons we are here today, to really bring you guys together. it's not only about showcasing the capabilities we have and giving you examples from our speakers, but also to connect you guys to each other. And Catherine said at the beginning, we are having a brokerage event on the 15th of December, where we are really hoping to bring challenge holders together with solutions provider to really scope out those collaboration projects of the future, which helps us to address the net zero ambitions. So with this, I'm going to pass back to Catherine to introduce our first speaker.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dana. That was a great overview of what we're trying to do today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ian Archer from IOIC. So Ian, if you can attempt to share your screen and bring your presentation up, that would be fantastic. Amazing. I can see it. It's worked.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's a good start. Good start. Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Dana. And thank you for the invitation to come and talk today. And thanks for everyone for joining. It seems like a nice big audience today, so it's great to see everyone's interest. So I'm going to be talking a bit about some of the work going on in Scotland that IBIOIC are coordinating and working with some of our partner companies. For those of you that don't know IBIOIC, we are a networking, business engagement and skills organisation. We're a bit like the KTN, I guess. We have a large industrial network of about 120, 130 companies, and a lot of and the Scottish university network around that we work with at the same time, and a lot of the universities in the north of England as well through our skills programme. As I say, we're similar in many ways to the way the KTN operate. That we have funding available for members. Right now we have a PhD competition open for people interested in sponsoring industry-led academic-led PhD projects. So check out the IBIOIC CTP website for details of that funding if that's something of interest to you. I should say this is the first time I've ever used a Prezi presentation, and I'm hoping it goes okay, but let's see how it pans out. It should be okay. So I wanted to start off just by talking a little bit around about what we think of as IB in the Industrial Biotech and Innovation Centre. And we've come to view this as the technology that underpins the bioeconomy. We've realised it's not a sector in its own right. It doesn't really work in that way, because the companies we work with are so diverse and so different. So we have companies ranging from little SMEs, literally one-person startups that are on the first year of their journey, through to the likes of GSK, Croda, P&G and Unilever. So some very large companies in that space. But they do all share a lot of underpinning technology, and that's where the value we've realized comes from, is it's in the networking of that underpinning technology value. So I drew this picture actually about 5 years ago now, when I first joined IBIOIC, to try and explain to people, to my new colleagues actually, where I saw all of these technologies trying to fit together. At the time, I must admit, my background at Ingenza meant that I was very much focused on the left-hand side of this diagram, which is really what we nowadays would call synthetic, well, what we call synthetic biology. It's really everything that's happening inside the cell. So all of that chemistry and biochemistry and molecular biology that's happening inside the cell. Today really is focused much more on the other side of this diagram, much more what would be defined as biorefining, the kind of things that Dana has talked about. And it's something that's been a really interesting learning experience for me in that biorefining space. So one very quick comment that's worth mentioning here is when I look at the speed at which companies can commercialize technology in on the two halves of this diagram. We've got projects going on that left-hand side in synthetic biology that are I'm not exaggerating here, in their, going into their 10th year, their second decade of development, and still not generating profits for the companies involved. Whereas on this right-hand side, we've got companies that have started, grown, and some really exciting opportunities for investment now, where people are going to be making money from manufacturing processes in this space. So really, I guess on that left-hand side of the diagram, we're talking about making chemicals from scratch inside a cell effectively. On this right hand side, we're taking existing materials, existing biomass, and trying to do something interesting with it. And that something interesting, it can be quite different depending on where that feedstock comes from. I've got the bottom of this diagram, we've got waste, we've got virgin crops, marine materials, wood materials, and then really more recently, I guess, we've started to talk about carbon capture and in particular and use, and how that might work out as well. So if I could give a couple of examples while we're of different areas. the waste streams feedstock is something that has generated a huge amount of interest, and the one that I think is really interesting to focus on in Scotland is whiskey waste, because it's a large waste stream. It's a large, I shouldn't call it waste streams because the whiskey industry doesn't like that, they call it co-products, but there are a lot of co-products associated with the whiskey industry, and one of the reasons why people like it as a feedstock is it is stable. Those waste streams, those co-products have been the same for the last 100 years, and they'll still be the same in the next 100 years. That process isn't changing, and they all pretty much share the same process, and they end up with a very similar set of co-product streams in the pot ale and the draft that comes from that process. And that means it means it's a good opportunity for looking for interesting product in that space. So we've got quite a lot of companies who are interested in valorizing those co-products. So I'll take one example, would be Horizon Proteins, who are a spin out from Heriot Watt, who have an on-site distillery protein purification technology, which fishes the protein out from the pot ale, and that gets can be formulated as fish food for the aquaculture industry. Similarly, MyAlgae are in a similar space, but they're looking at a different part of the co-product stream. They're actually much more interested in the carbohydrate and the carbon that's in those streams, because they grow algae and they want the high value oils that come from that algae. And part of their value proposition is also water treatment. It's about cleaning up a water treatment stream. So there's a few different products there already. There's clean water, there's algae, or rather the omega-3, the omega oils in the algae, and protein there separately. So we're running a project at the moment where we're actually bringing a few of these companies together to think about combining technologies into a single biorefinery, and that's something that's about to start fairly soon, funded by Zero Waste Scotland and iBioIC, to try and help these companies, all of whom have got a good business case on an individual basis, but given that they're looking at different parts of the material, different components, and they want different elements of it, it makes sense to think about whether or not those technologies could make more money when they're combined together in some kind of joint venture biorefinery operation. So I think whiskey is an interesting one. It's much more challenging when you start to think about things like food waste, I think, because the definition of the material is so much worse. We know what whiskey waste is. We know what it is now. We know what it is in 10 years, and it'll still be the same in 100 years' time. Food waste could be quite different. If we're thinking about other materials in here, marine, there's an opportunity for marine biomass from algae in particular. There's probably £300 million worth of interesting chemicals just in the alginate alone from the biomass off the Scottish coast, which we're not allowed to touch because of legislation that was passed through the Scottish government a few years ago, because people saw it was too much of an environmental threat. So it's interesting to see that when you think these opportunities might be there, it doesn't take long before people can start spotting some serious problems, potential problems with those kind of those materials. So where we saw that as a big opportunity in the past, it's possibly not seen like that right now for chemicals production. We also work closely with Scottish Forestry, who are interested in valorizing some of the co-products from the forestry industry. That's really challenging, as everybody I'm sure is aware of. Converting lignocellulosic biomass into valuable materials is challenging, and something that's a holy grail around a lot of the biorefining sector all around the world. And I guess the final one to mention here is CO2 and conversion of CO2. So there are a number of companies in our network that are interested in probably growing algae from, mostly growing algae, again, using different feedstocks from CO2 and light. That light comes from power, and it's an interesting concept, an interesting idea that sometimes that power might itself be a waste product. So there are certain areas of Scotland already that can generate more power than they can use, and you can be paid to take that power off companies' hands rather than them turn it off. And so there's opportunities there, and I think that's something that's going to grow over the next 10 to 20, maybe even 30 years. We're going to see many more opportunities for what's essentially waste electricity that people can use and access. And I think that's something that people should be taking very, very seriously. So we kind of work across, thinking that gives you an example of some of the companies we're interested in working. I'm going to talk, one of the feedstocks I didn't mention at all there were crops, so kind of virgin crop materials, and that's something that we're looking at very seriously now in Scotland. We've got a lot of work in early stage research. We're interested in development, but I'm going to jump straight on now to manufacturing, because I think it's manufacturing where if we really when we're talking about net zero, it's manufacturing where you have the impact. And I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had about, and it's an interesting area to look at, to think about what kind of scale is necessary before you really have a big impact on carbon emissions. So, you know, some products are quite, some sectors are relatively small. So the chemicals industry has certainly in terms of pharmaceuticals is relatively small for those materials. But what materials are there we could be making that we need in much larger quantities that actually have that potential to impact on our carbon emissions? So if I jump at an opportunity, and this is a real but disguised opportunity of a particular bio-based plastic project, this is potentially, if you're thinking about an opportunity for a pilot plant, it's relatively small by chemical industry standards, plastics facility, 25,000 tons a year. It depends clearly on the process and the material, but a decent rule of thumb here might be that you would need around about 100,000 tons of sugar for about 25,000 tons of a bio-based plastic. If you think back to where's that sugar going to come from, that's about 500,000 tons of sugar beet, which is the product that we could potentially grow in Scotland. So Scotland did grow sugar beet, and it had its own sugar refinery in Cooper in Fife, which closed in the early 70s. We're interested in investigating whether we can resurrect that industry to see what that would look like as a potential feedstock for a bio-based chemical industry in the country. So 500,000 tons of sugar beet is about 6,000 hectares of land. You probably can get about 80 tons per hectare of sugar beet and that's what happens. That's what farmers in England and France can get, and there's no reason to think that the Scottish farmers couldn't do something similar. So the question to us now, are these big numbers? And I think the short answer to that question is really no, they're not actually. This is about 50 to 100 million pounds worth of plastic effectively, and that's probably pushing it a bit, maybe even a bit less than that. The value of that sugar is about 30 million pounds, maybe. It's about 10 million pounds worth of sugar beet, and 6,000 hectares is about 1% of Scotland's arable land. So these are quite small numbers, and in fact, they're just too small to get anybody excited. Farmers are not going to get out of bed for these kind of numbers. They want more material than that, and they need better guarantees. We've got a number of companies in this area actually who probably have this kind of demand, but each one carries a certain amount of risk, and that's a bit of a challenge for persuading people to invest in the infrastructure needed for sugar beet. Sugar beet does require quite a lot of investment in terms of farming infrastructure. The machinery is not common to say wheat harvesting, so there would be a big investment needed by farmers to get themselves going in this space. But so one or two opportunities like that really aren't particularly attractive. So we question ourselves, what else could we be making in that space? And the obvious answer really is potentially biofuels. So in Scotland at the moment, we import about 57 million litres of bioethanol, mostly from France, and that's blended in Grangemouth into E5 petrol. That's going to double fairly soon because we're going to move up to E10. So you can see roughly what the demands are going to be. We've done a lot of work here, working with the National Non-Food Crop Centre, and they estimate that the optimal size for a distillery, for a sugar beet and processing and distillery in Scotland, would be about 170 million litres to meet the demand needed for fuel and for also for some chemicals. So you can see the numbers that amounts to there. We're now up to about 3% of Scotland's land. So that's an interesting thought experiment, at least to begin with. Again, question ourselves, is that a big number? Well, obviously we're quite adept at making alcohol, distilling alcohol in Scotland. The largest grain distillery in Scotland is the Diageo Cameron Bridge Distillery. It's the biggest, 130 million litres of ethanol. You'll recognise the kind of products they make at this place in Cameron Bridge in Fife. So actually 170 million litres as a facility is not beyond the realms of our imagination here in Scotland. There are multiple plants here at around about 100 million litres of ethanol for alcohol in these kind of in drinks for the drinks industry. So in terms of where we are with our sugar beet program, we've got a trial going on with farmers at the moment. Farmers are very enthusiastic about this, and I'll come to that in a second as to why the farmers really want to work on this. We've started speaking to investors who recognise this as a really big opportunity, as a really good opportunity. They see it as a good long-term investment. Interestingly, they come at it with a different angle to the farmers, and the farmers are concerned about being offered long-term contracts for production, because that's important for their investment, and the investors are worried about the farmers not wanting long-term contracts because they feel that there's something better might come along in the future that the farmers would prefer to grow. So that doesn't seem like an insurmountable object to get past, and we're working closely with the Scottish Government to try and help support that. So we do have a trial running at the moment. This is back in the spring. These pictures were taken back in May. We've got trials running from Melrose right the way up to the northeast of Scotland, and I'll show you that on a map in a second. This is what the beet looked like. Me holding up some beet in a farm up in at Stracathro in August, and then the other picture with the shovel there shows you roughly what size a sugar beet looks like. At this time of year, they'll probably be a bit bigger. They'll start to get harvested probably next month, and then through to the early part of the new year. So thinking about where that would happen, I'm jumping out a bit here. Scotland itself is a fairly small country in terms of its space here. The red dots on this map are the kind of supposedly the major conurbations. One of them near me in Haddington on the right there is a town of about 10,000 people. So some of these are pretty small places actually. Almost everybody lives in that central belt, and in fact, all of the industry is focused around around central Scotland between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and in particular in the Falkirk and Grangemouth region. And the sugar beet growing region is just to the north of there, mostly from the bottom of this picture now just shows Edinburgh, and to the east of Edinburgh would be East Lothian, where I live, and then north into Fife and Perth and Kinross and Angus are the classic regions there. One of the reasons the farmers are so enthusiastic here, and when I mentioned before about 3% of the land being required, the farmers actually don't view it that way. The farmers need this crop. The farmers are desperate for new break crops. So this is a crop that basically is going to fill in between the real money makers. So that's a really big opportunity, and it's one of the reasons why the farmers are so excited. So there's plenty of land available to do this, and the land needs to be used with this type of crop. So something we're particularly excited about. And I'm going to finish just by kind of reiterating something that Dana said towards the end of her talk there. She talked about this as being a local opportunity. And the economics here are always going to be challenging. Making ethanol in particular is a challenge, or making money from ethanol, I should say, is a challenge. Making the ethanol is dead easy. But making money from it is more difficult, and it is a challenge. I think there's a good business case for the farmers. I think there's a good business case at the other end, and we could pull that together. I think there's an economic opportunity, but there's also a big local opportunity. And I think what's happened over the last year, hopefully, is teaching us a lot about the value of resilience. How much do we want to spend on resilience and on our infrastructure? And I think it's worth thinking, resilience is a difficult thing to spend money on because you don't get an immediate use out of it. But, all insurance policies are a waste of money until the day that you actually need them. So I'm going to finish there because I know I'm over my time, and I'm very happy to answer questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. So if you do have a question for Ian, please do pop it into the chat box, and we will bring all the questions together in the panel session at the end. So thanks again, Ian, for a very informative presentation there on the Landscaping Scotland. I would like to hand over to our second speaker of the morning, and that is James Highgate from Green Fuels. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, James, that you can also share your screen.
Yeah, let's hope it works better than earlier.
Yeah. I'll let you know when I can see it.
Okay, so if I go share screen, is that working?
Yes, it's just coming up. I think it's, yeah, there we are. If you can just put it into presentation mode. Yeah, perfect. Over to you, James.
Great. Okay, thanks, Catherine. Hi, everybody. So today my company is Green Fuels. I'm going to talk a bit about our sort of biofuels production in practice, because that's what we do. So quick overview of the company. I founded Green Fuels back in 2003, primarily for moving away from fossil carbon myself and actually using biofuels as my own vehicle, but it quickly grew into a significant player in the industry. We now have a customer base in over 80 countries, producing it's around about 420 million litres of waste-derived biofuel per year. We hold a royal warrant for the Prince of Wales for our long-term supply and for various things there. And the technology that we've developed has always been very much focused on fuel, so on waste. So when I'm talking about biomass, I'm primarily talking about sort of waste inputs, but we do other things as well. And the thing that we're really proud of is our technology has saved around 6.5 million tonnes of carbon since we started. So Tesla started the same year, and we're just ahead, which I'm quite pleased about. But it's good that we're all doing some good. So lessons learned over the past 17 years. The main one is control of feedstock supply is critical. If you haven't got your oil well, there's no point building a huge refinery to process it. So that is very important. Not all feedstocks are sustainable. So from our side, we insist on a biogenic carbon. There's some great work happening with fixing fossil carbon, but our view is that probably shouldn't be used in fuel. We will avoid the use of crops with a negative land use change, and we, wherever possible, will avoid competing with food supply. So our opinion from the start is waste feedstocks are best processed at distributed scale, and our refineries that we built tend to be scaled to the available feedstock supply. When we started, that was quite unusual. There were huge refineries being built, but actually what you find now is many of those have struggled to meet expectations. Many are running massively into capacity because of the limitations of feedstock supply. And I think the important thing with this presentation is actually there's a limited toolkit for meaningful decarbonisation in a real world timescale. You know, there are only a certain number of things that we can be doing in a timescale that's actually going to, to save us. So, these are the things that probably should be focused on at scale. And our view is that there's probably, you need to focus on where you can get the most bang for your buck, really. So where do we see biofuels moving? Well, the transports or modalities that we see, which are going to be very difficult to decarbonise in any other way, are aviation and marine. The reality is there's a lot of cool work going on for decarbonising in other ways, but the reality is it's going to be very difficult for that to happen in a timescale that's meaningful. There's little current use in these transports, but we are now starting to see mandates, incentives and regulations driving that growth. And so when you look at the projected market for biofuels in both aviation and marine over the next 10 years, it's valued at somewhere between 30 and 35 billion. And why do we feel they're difficult to decarbonise in any other way? Well, kind of about energy density. If you want to move something very big, a very long way, you kind of need something that's got a high density per litre and per kilo. So fossil fuels are amazing at doing this, which is why we use them so extensively, but obviously they are very, very bad things to be using. So we're looking at how you can replace those with a biogenic feedstock. Electrification makes perfect sense for road transport, and even though we run a biofuels company, I've been driving electric cars for years now, and I'm convinced that is the way forward for vehicle usage and for a lot of other means. But you can't, a large passenger aircraft, the batteries will be too heavy, take up too much space. And with hydrogen, I don't know if you've seen a kilo of hydrogen, but it actually takes up quite a lot of space, even in liquid form. So, you've got to think what these, what's being done. The other thing, these are also areas where demand is increasing for fuels, other areas where they're not. So the advantages over biogenic feedstocks are obviously it's cyclic. If you can have a use, first of all, as a waste, great. But actually, even if you're using plants directly, it's very good. Obviously, we all know fossil fuels are very bad. But when you look at non-biogenic biofuels, for example, if you've gone to the effort to fix that fossil carbon, probably best to keep it in a fixed state rather than setting fire to it again. There are lots of opportunities for use in using those fossil carbons in a fixed state. Better to keep it from going into the atmosphere. So a bit about projects that we're working on at the moment. We've just literally this week shipping some equipment out to Brazil. This is for a project in a region called Juiz de Fora. This is linked to a platform called Platform de Biokerosene, the Zona da Mata. But basically, there's an area of what used to be Atlantic rainforest, was then coffee plantation, was then pasture, and that is now basically sort of unproductive dirt over this, not far outside of Rio. It's owned by lots and lots of small farmers, and there needs to be encouragement there where they can actually generate income and hopefully do their farming more sustainably. So the project aims to reforest around about 75,000 hectares in that region, but also to start with, it's recycling waste cooking oil in the region, and around about 375,000 tonnes that will be available in the region there. So this is a project that's underway at the moment. We're just starting with the reforestation currently, and here we're using a native rainforest species called macuba, which is being grown in a silvopastoral regime with coffee, bananas, but also there's cattle, etc. on the land as well, so there is income to the smaller farmers. We're just setting up the very first commercial biofuels project in Oman. This is utilising waste cooking oil collected across Oman. Legislation has changed in Oman to prevent the export of this, and this is why again we see decentralised working, because at the moment lots of this material travels all over the world, but actually the demand is always there wherever the feedstocks supply. So for us, we see this as a beachhead in the region, and potentially expanding to, or we will hopefully be expanding to, aviation and marine in the future. Obviously, the surrounding countries are a very large aviation hub, and here we've joint ventured with the waste collector in the region to enable, again, to make sure we have a secure feedstock supply. The next project we're working on is in India. India has seen a very progressive change in regulations to drive the bioeconomy. So waste cooking oil has been banned from export, and there's this nationwide scheme, the repurpose used cooking oil scheme, that's put in place to encourage the collection. And the driver here was primarily from a health point of view, because a lot of this oil was being reused and sold to another restaurant and reused. And now there's encouragement for it to be collected and converted into biofuel. So it can no longer be exported from India. The government have put in place a mandated blend, which is huge, the 5% blend. So something like 8.3 billion litre requirement now in the country. And at the moment, the country's meeting around about 8% of that demand. The oil marketing companies have got a guaranteed buyout price for your production, and so it's a relatively straightforward business model. So the first facility is going out Q1 next year, but we can see that growing to quite a large number of facilities quite quickly. And again, on a distributed scale. So these are facilities that we'll be setting up in cities, etc. And then moving across more to the aviation side. So in the UK, where we see a much more developed biofuels market, well, we're scaling up our Sabre technology for upgrading waste cooking oils and fats to jet. And so this is, again, it's purely waste derived rather than blending in virgin oils, and there's some validity in the pre-treatment that we use on our process. The hydrogen will be produced with thermocatalytic reforming process. And this fuel is a drop-in fuel that meets the standard. So this project is being funded through a Horizon 2020 project, and we have an offtake with British Airways for the production from the plants. And also we were honoured to win the KET Biotechnology Award earlier this year for this project. So with all of the areas we're focused on, it's good to be mindful of the Sustainable Development Goals and seeing where we are focused here. Obviously, displacing carbon emissions is the biggie here, but actually, if you're mindful and you're using waste, and you're looking at the bigger picture of it, actually you can cover a lot of the SDGs with this. So, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's me. Please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. And further to that, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A. And if anyone would like any introductions to any of the speakers after this webinar finishes, please do contact myself or Dana, and we can arrange that for you for any direct introductions. Thank you, James. Very interesting stuff. I would now like to move on to our third speaker, Stephen Wallace from Edinburgh University. So welcome to the floor, Stephen, and over to you. You're on mute there, Stephen. Just need to...
Somebody had to do it, right?
It's usually me, so don't worry. So
okay.
I can see your screen. Yeah, no problem.
Great, okay.
If you want to just put it into presentation mode, yeah, perfect.
Okay. So hi everyone. It's really great to have the opportunity to be part of this discussion today on such an interesting topic. I'm Stephen Wallace. I work in the School of Biology here in Edinburgh, but actually I'm not a biologist. I'm a chemist by training. But over the past 5 or 6 years since my training in synthetic organic chemistry, I've become really fascinated by what can be achieved in the field of renewable chemicals using synthetic biology. So I hope this resonates with perhaps a lot of chemists who are here today out of interest in what is happening in the field of biotechnology. So I was asked to talk to you today quite philosophically, I guess, about where I see the future of sustainable synthesis progressing in the future. And I think, to start really broadly, chemical manufacturing today is broadly, let me just get my laser pointer. Broadly separated into 2 approaches, that being the use of synthetic biology, as Ian introduced earlier, where we can combine the amazing enzymatic chemistry of living systems and with the genetic programmability of modern molecular biology techniques to make chemicals renewably in cellular systems. And that sort of stands in contrast, but in complement, I think, to more traditional methods of synthetic chemistry that use a huge array of catalysts and reagents, by and large non-enzymatically, to manipulate feedstocks from the petrochemical industry into the range of industrial chemicals that we rely on as a society today. I think it's important to say that both fields have their merits and their strengths. However, as synthetic biology has become hugely enabled over the past decade, I think it's really important for us to sit back now and really think about where we see the future of chemical synthesis and what we see it looking like in perhaps a decade or 20 years' time. Are we going to be fermenting everything that we rely on industrially, or is there room within that future for multi-step chemical synthesis? And there has been some really interesting discussion over the past decades on this topic by leaders in the field. There's this great article by Jay Kiesling back in 2008, and then this constructive debate between synthetic chemists and biologists in Nature in 2012. However, there's been not that much since then, and I think this really is quite disappointing given how much we've advanced in technology since then. And it doesn't take you very long to actually search through the synthetic biology literature and find quite provocative statements, such as the field has advanced to the point that one can imagine producing nearly any organic molecule, including those not produced naturally in an engineered microorganism, and that in any future metabolic engineering will soon rival and potentially eclipse synthetic organic chemistry. I think these are quite stark, quite brave things to be saying, and I don't agree with them at all. And I don't think they're particularly useful or helpful to us moving forward as sort of in chemical manufacturing in general. So I just wanted, if you take anything away from my talk today, please take away this. I think synthetic biology cannot replace 150 years of innovation in synthetic organic chemistry. And I don't think it should do, to be honest. I think there is a future that involves a combination of these 2 approaches. And if you think about it, these 2 fields have existed for the best part of a century. Fermenting molecules isn't a new thing, but these are 2 fields that really historically have never really talked to one another. They've never really interacted in any way, and I think that's a shame. So I think, and I'd like to present today that in any future, I think it seems likely that the most ideal approach towards the synthesis of a given industrial molecule will involve the combined use of tools from both disciplines. And this is really something I've been interested in, particularly for the past 5 years, and we've written articles to this effect, both in the academic literature and in the sort of public science sector. And I'd encourage you to read these if you're interested in what that future might look like. And I think, as I've mentioned, many people see this sort of competition emerging between synthetic chemistry and synthetic biology, because they're so similar in what they're trying to achieve. It's effectively identical what they're trying to achieve. However, I think these similarities make them really complementary, and therefore my lab here in Edinburgh explore opportunities at the interface of synbio and synthetic chemistry. where we effectively take tools from either discipline and we apply them in the context of the other to see what is possible effectively. And to give you a bit more detail on what that actually means, what we're doing in SynBio is taking traditional catalysts or reagents used in synthetic organic chemistry, particularly based on earth-abundant metals in the first row transition metal series, and applying them in the context of metabolically engineered microbes to see whether these approaches can be used to either improve current sort of small molecule production pathways in bacteria, or to perhaps diversify away from natural metabolites to enable you access to compounds that couldn't be accessed using a purely genetic approach. But at the same time, we're also working pretty closely with synthetic chemists to develop engineered cellular systems, perhaps to be used in the delivery of chemical reagents, or to mitigate any hazardous or environmentally damaging aspects of current chemical processes. And I'd really like to just spend the last 5 minutes of my talk today cherry picking some examples of the work that we've done in these specific areas. And the first really is on the microbial delivery of hydrogen. So as I'm sure you're all aware, molecular hydrogen is a reductant that's used throughout the chemical industry, primarily for the metal catalyzed reduction of carbon-carbon double bonds, amongst many other sort of functional group transformations. However, hydrogen itself is also a metabolite that's present throughout nature. It's used as an electron carrier in various microbial settings. So what we were able to show is that by using synthetic biology to encode a pathway for hydrogen production in E. coli, we were able to combine this with a biocompatible palladium catalyst to enable carbon-carbon bond reduction in a way that doesn't require the use of pressurized hydrogen gas anymore. You simply have an organism sitting in the reaction delivering you the reagent that you require. And we've had a lot of interest from industry because of the advantages that this offers to industrial processes. And I think it's a really nice example of what can be achieved where synthetic biology is applied directly in a synthetic chemistry setting. The second example, which is more recent, is on the microbial production of styrene from glucose in this engineered strain of E. coli. And the combination of this pathway with iron catalysis, this is an iron phthalocyanine catalyst, it's just commercially available, it's dirt cheap. And when you add this to cultures, it simply sits on the surface of the culture and it intercepts styrene as it's produced by this organism and forms a variety of phenyl cyclopropane esters and amides of interest to mainly the flavors and fragrances industries. But importantly, this is really the first example where you can make these molecules directly from carbohydrate feedstocks using a combined chemical biological approach. And it gives you a sort of way to make these molecules that actually isn't possible using a purely biological based approach or a purely chemical approach in isolation. And because we're talking today about biomass to chemicals, I thought it would be appropriate to take you through a really recent example of work from my group here in Edinburgh that we published earlier this year on the bioproduction of adipic acids. I'm sure most of you here will be aware of adipic acid, but for those of you who aren't, it's a small molecule that I've been pretty fascinated with for the last couple of years. It's used in the production of nylon industrially. It's probably one of the most prolific petrochemicals that we make on the industrial scale at the moment. However, the current petrochemical method that's used to make adipic acid is one of the most environmentally damaging processes that occurs worldwide. In fact, the nitrous oxide emissions that come from this one industrial process actually contribute to 10 to 15% of all human-associated nitrous oxide emissions worldwide. I think it's quite dramatic, it's quite startling statistic. So therefore, developing biological approaches to the synthesis of adipic acid has been given a huge amount of attention in the past decade. So earlier this year, based on some really pioneering work in enzyme discovery over the last couple of years, we were able to build this 4-enzyme pathway into a genetically encoded single plasmid system, and in E. coli optimize the transformation of guaiacol, which is one of the major sort of monomeric units of lignin polymer. And to demethylate this using this cytochrome P450 system from a Malcolotopsis to produce catechol, which is then further processed in the cell via this dioxygenase from Pseudomonas and then this reductase from Bacillus to give you adipic acid in a single reaction in pretty good conversions, although we've actually achieved beyond this already. So, but this is what we reported earlier this year. One of the great things about doing this in a biological setting, apart from it's enabling the use of a really sustainable feedstock, is that the formaldehyde that's generated in this first stage of the reaction here is actually quite toxic to many, or it can deactivate many of the enzymes in the pathway. But in E. coli, E. coli consumes formaldehyde using native metabolic processes. So you can see here in the full cellular system here, you get no formaldehyde, whereas if you have no cells, you get almost quantitative conversion. So there's benefits to actually stringing these enzymes together and producing these in a single organism. So I just wanted to finish to conclude up again with the statement that synthetic biology is not going to replace the chemical industry. And I think there are really interesting opportunities involving this sort of bipartisan future. And again, I think, speaking as a synthetic chemist, really, we have really exciting opportunities, in my opinion, to embrace what I think is going to continue to be a really transformational technology. And quite frankly, we shouldn't push back against something that promises to decrease our burden on the environment and to increase the sustainability of current chemical processes. But at the same time, I think synthetic biologists need to understand a bit more about how to make molecules and to have more of a molecular understanding about what is possible using modern green methods of chemical synthesis. These are incredible methodologies that are coming out all the time. And I think this takes dialogue, and that dialogue doesn't exist at the moment, and it certainly is not helped by maybe some demonization that occurs in synthetic biology literature. So I think there's really exciting possibilities to be had at the interface of these fields, and that's where I see the future of this field being its most productive, certainly in the next 10, 20 years' time. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my group here in Edinburgh. The people who did the work are highlighted in bold here. We have so many other projects involving so many really interesting feedstocks. So Joe Sadler is a senior postdoc fellow in my group who's working on plastic waste and has had some fantastic results recently valorizing plastic waste into high value chemicals. Mirren's working with a great bunch of scientists at Argent Energy to take food derived sewer waste and turn that into fragrance compounds for use in the chemical industry. And of course, I don't have time to talk about that at the moment. I'd be happy to talk about that more with you later today or at another time. So thanks.
Oh, fantastic, Stephen. Really great presentation. And yeah, again, if you have any questions for Stephen, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them later on. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to our final speaker, the lovely Sarah Hickenbottom, the CEO of BioVale. So Sarah, over to you, and I can already see your screen.
Thank you, Catherine. And can you hear me as well?
Yes, can hear you perfectly.
Fantastic. And thank you very much for the invite to be here today. We've had 3 absolutely superb speakers who have all given a different perspective. And I've been reading some of the comments and questions in the chat boxes. And it's changing what I think I'm going to say. But to kick off, BioVale, we're very similar to the KTN and to iBioAC. We're Yorkshire and the Humber, and we are building a circular bioeconomy. And that is chemicals, but it's also all the other aspects of the bioeconomy, which the chemicals industry feeds into. Now, I have put here the title of our session today, Biomass to Chemicals. But I thought I would pose a bit of a philosophical question, as Stephen did. Can we break free of our gilded petroleum thought cages? Now, to go through this quickly, what is a gilded petroleum thought cage? Well, there it is. It's gilded because it's actually really a rather nice place to be. And there's the petroleum world that we've built. We've built it over 200 years plus. And when we talk biomass to chemicals, it's important to take that step back and realize that our thought, our education, our lives since we were born, in fact, some of us are here because of this petroleum world. it's shaped by it. So we have to take on board these things when we look to radicalize and shape and use all the new technologies that we have to build a new world, which is what we're doing, a circular biomass world that's fit for future supply chains and the global challenges we face. There it is, the petroleum industry. Now, I am not in any way demonizing the petroleum industry. As I said, most of us owe our lives, our existence, our food, our security to the industry. But now we're in a stage where obviously global challenges mean we need to rethink. So obviously I've stolen something here. I do not have permission, I'm afraid, Catherine, to use this particular slide, but it says it all. And it's worthwhile actually reading some of the things that people are saying in the chat box as well, to think, what does think different really mean? It isn't only about embracing new technologies. It isn't only about embracing new feedstocks. We should also remember it should be about being holistic in our attitude. So we should not become blinkered by concepts such as net zero, which whilst are absolutely crucial, they don't take precedence over things like soil erosion, water consumption, energy consumption. And I would like to say, I mean, when I talked to Catherine and Dana before this event, they did say be provocative. I would like to say that, wouldn't it be marvelous if the biomass to chemicals, the chemical industry, does factor in these things when we decide what to build at commercial scales, and I'm talking real chemical scales, in the sense that if the future petroleum world can actually do it better than the bioeconomy chemicals world, and by better I simply mean using less resources and creating less waste and emissions, etc., then perhaps we should be brave enough to leave that to the petroleum world and focus on those incredibly difficult and most noxious value chains where we can make a huge difference. There it is, the petroleum world, carbon-carbon bond. It's a brilliant bond, obviously. I am a chemist, by the way, by training, so this is my world. But the biomass to chemicals world is full of oxygen by definition. And we shouldn't forget that also when we're deriving our new commercial scale value chains. Stripping oxygen out, it has a benefit and it has a role, but you know what? Can we rethink things and actually utilize that oxygen? So that's where I come to the toolbox. Now, we've actually been talking about the toolbox for the whole of today. Stephen, this is your interface, if you like. Inside that toolbox, we have synthetic biology, we have industrial biology, but it's important to know we have traditional chemistry, we have thermochemistry, pyrolysis, all the different tools which have been working for us for the last 100 years can be mixed in with all the tools that we're developing. And I'm going to add more to that. Working at the interface between biology, biochemistry, genetics, new crop developments, traditional chemistry, that's where the magic happens. It's when people who don't normally talk together talk. It's when we realize that something that the pharmaceutical industry has been doing for 30, 40 years actually can be applied to the chemicals industry with success. It's when we recognize that PLA from lactic acid has actually been produced at scale for 70 years for the food industry. In fact, it can't be made from the petroleum industry. It's about learning the history of what's happened before and trying not to repeat it. And I would also add that into that toolbox, it would be useful to think, I've already mentioned upstream in terms of novel agricultural products and what we can do in terms of maybe even changing waste streams. Those products don't necessarily have to change the crop, they can change the byproducts. Or they could change the end of life cycle. If you know, imagination is our only limit. And in that, it's also really useful for the chemicals industry beyond commodity chemicals to think about the end use life products and how can we adjust our chemicals portfolio to better fit what we need. And certainly when we talk about plastics and materials, bringing designers and a whole different world into this will open up avenues that sitting here today, we might not be recognizing. It's quite a toolbox, but it really does mean that we can achieve an awful lot as long as it's circular. I mean, that is the core message of what we're talking about. And when we say circular, it's circular not only in terms of what's been discussed today, CO2 and resources, but also it has to be fit for people, planet, and profit. That's quite a challenge. We have to think of economics, we have to think of scale, we have to look at what's happening in the real world and either change that world to meet what we can achieve or change what we achieve to meet that world. Now, a few things crop up, and here we have waste. Now, obviously, I've chosen here waste that's actually non-biomass. It's all plastics, etc., etc. But that's because increasingly, when we talk biomass to chemicals, we are actually broadening our definition of what biomass to chemicals means, in the sense that really, in my view, to answer the question, what feedstocks will be used in 2050, it's really, hopefully, to minimize the use of virgin fossil fuels, crude oil, natural gas, etc. So in other words, anything we can employ that minimizes the volumes of virgin fossil fuels that are consumed in the production of chemicals is a success. So for example, SABIC are working at scale for chemical recycling of plastics to produce new plastics. That works. They're eliminating virgin fossil fuels from their supply chain. In fact, big news this month on Teesside, we have a couple of projects that are looking at either recycling mechanically or chemically at large scales to do exactly that. We can also bring on board organic municipal solid waste. Imagine, our black bin waste. And when we talk biomass to chemicals and we talk about the United Kingdom, we also need to recognize that we're not, the best in terms of volumes and economics and price of virgin crops. But you know what? We have a lot of plastics and we have a lot of municipal solid waste. And I can also bring on board gases into this. I know one of the other webinars touched on this subject, but in Yorkshire, we have Drax, who are producing electricity from biomass. We could talk about that, but they're also carbon capture and working with Startups UK, amazing innovation to turn that captured carbon dioxide into animal feed. And what about combining it with hydrogen that's being developed, green hydrogen in the Humber? You combine that and then you can make ammonia, and then you can make the fertilizers. And then by partnering with a rural region like Yorkshire next door, you can actually use those fertilizers locally. And then you've developed those local supply chains that were being talked about at the beginning of today. Now, I realize I am going to run out of time. And I have one other topic I'd like to touch upon. But yes, I'd like Socrates to say the secret of change, it's not to fight the old, it's to build on the new. It's easier said than done. I have a couple of projects that I might not have time to talk through in detail, but perhaps we can talk about them in the discussion, because what I would like to do, actually, Catherine, how much time do I have? Sorry, I didn't pay attention to the time when we started.
Maybe another 5 minutes, Sarah. Please go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to briefly touch upon a project. I was asked to mention some of the exciting projects that are happening. I'm going to talk about one that's actually originated in Australia and at York, a company called Circa. Circa Sustainable Chemicals, they came out of Australia and worked with the University of York's Green Chemicals Centre of Excellence. And one of the things Circa did is one that I've been saying, they broke free of a gilded petroleum thought cage because they wanted to use biomass feedstocks. Waste streams is very important to mention. They wanted the feedstock to be agnostic, so it doesn't matter as long as it's woody in base. Sawdust is actually one they're using right now. And they also wanted to target solvents, because when we talk chemicals, it's important for us not to realize that, don't forget processes. Working to change chemical manufacture through the processes, not just the end use product, is also an amazing opportunity that we're working with startups that are developing those technologies. And Circa wanted to strip out the use of dangerous solvents, DMF, DMSO, toluene, and they worked with the university to develop a new solvent called Cyrene, and Cyrene does just that. I don't have time to talk any more in detail about it, but they are now building their first commercial scale plant. They're doing it in France on a site of Total. They're using sawdust. It's a BBIJU, a European Union project flagship, and it's 11 million euros, and its capacity is 1,000 metric tons per annum, which is an excellent start. The view is that this is the start of something new. Now, why is this so special? Drop-in, novel, we can talk about these all day, but what we need to ask ourselves is, why do we use DMF? Why do we use DMSO, toluene, at scale I'm talking about, not necessarily in the lab? Well, it's not like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when the industrial chemicals industry said that DMF is the perfect solvent. It is absolutely amazing. No, it was what was available at the right price, at the right scale, the right just-in-time delivery, etc., etc., etc. So we don't need to replace DMF directly. Instead, we can go back to principles and build and devise what would be the perfect solvent. So their solvent, Circa's Cyrene, is environmentally benign. It can be produced at almost atmospheric pressure. As I said, it uses waste woody biomass. So it really is an example of building the new that's better than the old. Now, very briefly to finish, I was also asked to say a little bit about clusters and what are they? Well, a cluster, very briefly, it's Hollywood. It's the Hay-on-Wye bookshops. It's where naturally, ideally, you have all the assets to absolutely thrive in a particular sector. And iBioAC up in Scotland and BioVale down in York, with all of our stakeholders, including pilot scale support through our sister organisation, the Biorenewables Development Centre. Our goal is to accelerate that innovation and that change. It's about building a cluster that really brings on board the entire value chain. And that's what I'm saying here in this slide, that we're about our members. We really put the region, the location, the local supply chains at the forefront, and we use social glue and an overarching mission to be innovative and bridge that gulf between the laboratory, the pilot scale, the demonstration scale, and finally the commercial scale. And final point, BioVale is a co-founder of 3BI. 3BI, it's an intercluster, and the reason I wanted to show it is to introduce to you how much this is. Lots of regions are doing this, and what you'll find is we connect the UK now to Europe, the European leading clusters, in a really strong way. And CLIB, for example, is seeped at the heart and driven by the German chemicals industry. So we really are operating in complementary strengths. I'm not going through this slide, but you'll have it if you wish to see and follow up on these. Get in touch with me if you're interested in working with any of our clusters. There's the proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thanks, Catherine.
Oh, brilliant, Sarah. Really, really enjoyed that. So thank you to all our speakers for great thought-provoking presentations. I think, the general theme from everybody is the real need for the joining up of older, more traditional industries with the new emerging enabling technologies like IB and engineering. biology, I mean, as illustrated today, there's so much good work going on out there currently, but it's really obvious that this coming together will really catapult us into a sustainable world. So I think we can very much look forward to building on the old, like Sarah says, to a brighter future for us all. So thank you once again, everyone. So we're just going to go to our panel discussion, and we are a bit short on time. So I'm just going to ask one question before we go to the chat box and pick through a few other questions that you guys have submitted to us. So I think what would be good to know, it's a big question, if there is one thing that we can do right now to capitalize on the opportunities raised today, what do we think would be that one thing? So I'm going to ask that to Sarah first, seeing as Sarah has just finished, and I can see you on my screen, Sarah. I'm going to ask you what your top thing that we could do right now would be to move us forward as a community.
Well, there are two things. One is investment, and we could talk about that all day. But the second one is actually stripping out some of the regulatory risk that's involved in some of this technology, in the sense that regulations of using waste as a feedstock aren't fit for the technologies that are coming out, and they're holding us back, whether it's through the use of organic municipal solid waste for chemicals, or the use of food waste connected to insect technology to produce high added value molecules for pharma and chemicals, cosmetics, etc. So if we could be agile in our regulations and think holistically, bringing on board all our new technologies, then that would strip away, it would actually encourage investment, because investors shy away quite logically from a sector where the regulations tell them that they can't actually sell their products in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with you, Sarah, and I think everyone else that's on the call will as well. It comes up time and time again. Ian Archer, what would be your one thing?
I think carbon tax or carbon auctions. I think, yeah, when I look at the questions that have been posed to me in the chat here, there's some really good questions, perfectly valid, well, say more than perfectly valid, really challenging questions about whether or not the things that I talked about are ever going to be economically viable or not. Will people pay a green premium, for example, and that kind of thing? There are examples of people who pay green premiums. James mentioned he's driving an electric car. I've got an electric car that cost me a fortune, but I do it. I do it because I think it's the right thing to do. So there are people, but I'm in a very, very privileged position that I can afford to make that choice. I think we need to be recognizing that there are a huge number of negative externalities associated with those carbon emissions. I mean, obviously we all know that, but we're not charging for it. You know, the people that when we emit the carbon, oh, dog's just welcoming
joining in.
You know, that's my, I think I've made my point. I think we need to recognize the cost of the emissions that we're making now. And I think if we recognize the cost of those emissions, then actually what you would see is that some of the technologies that we're talking about here don't look quite as outlandish as they seem from an economic perspective. We're just not paying the bills for the system we've got at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Stephen, from working in academia, what is your viewpoint on the one thing you feel would be the next best thing to project us forward?
Yeah, I think maybe accelerating or increasing the interaction between industry and academia. There are plenty of solutions to the problems that we're faced in industrial biotech at the moment that have been developed already in academia. Amazing technologies like directed evolution or artificial metalloenzymes to really expand what we can make chemically from engineered cellular systems. So maybe accelerating that process from academic discovery to commercial implementation. And I think iBioIC is a fantastic way to facilitate that interaction, especially in Scotland.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few organisations in the UK that are designed to do that. So if people hopefully use that avenue more, then I think that would be great. James, from an industrial point of view, somebody who's actually working and trying to make money in this industry, what's the one thing that would be good for you?
If you could all buy technology from green fuels, that would really help.
Really?
No, I think it's the very much focus on not using fossil fuels wherever you can, and if you are if you're using fossil, identify where the carbon's come from, and if it's fossil carbon, keeping it fixed. The point I made here, I think genuinely we have a relatively limited time to solve this, and we've slogged our guts out for the last 17 years, saved 6.5 million tons of carbon, whereas the oil and gas industry has produced what, 480 billion tons. So it's kind of the best thing we can do, stop using fossil carbon, try and get oil and gas to change, and building on Ian's point, is tax the hell out of them, because they're one of the very few industries that don't actually clean up their mess.
Yeah.
And we all love to be able to get around, we all love all these things at a very low cost, but it's not realistic, and it's going to come and bite us in the backside in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
One of the harped on about it for a long time, you quite often see oil and gas investing in white elephants, or things that have such a far horizon time scale, diverts the eyes. The stuff they should be doing now is similar to what BP said. Let's pump 40% less oil out of the ground. That's going to have a very, very significant impact on decarbonization.
Definitely.
Sorry, I'm going to start ranting in a minute.
No, I think that's great. Really interesting viewpoints from everyone. And I don't think there's ever been a better time, to be honest, for a change in mindset from the general public. We haven't really spoken about the buy-in from the general public. And I think that's really starting to happen now, when people do want to see these changes. And I don't think we can underestimate the power of that individual change in mindset for moving away from fossil fuels. And I think people really do understand why we need to do that. So that market pull is definitely there. So I would like to now hand over to Dana, who is going to navigate some questions to our panel from the Q&A. So I think we have around 5 or 6 minutes, Dana, to ask a few questions there. So if I can hand over to you so you can pick the best ones.
Thanks, Catherine. Not sure if it is the best one, but I think one really interesting one is about lessons learned from the past. So we got a question from Steve Martin, who asked, there's been lots of money and time invested in the last 20 years around conversion of biomass to fuels and chemicals. And the question is, what can we learn from those past efforts to not make the same mistakes in the future? Sarah, I see you nodding. You want to start?
Well, it's an absolutely superb question. And actually, Stephen, you talked about adipic acid. Well, yesterday, my heart sank because I got an email telling me that Birdesign's bioprocessing units out in Malaysia are now for sale. There's a firestorm. Birdesign, for those who know, is a California bio-based chemicals company with a commercial scale technology to produce adipic acid from biomass, from vegetable, well, free fatty acids, etc. The technologies are there. They were using an enzymatic process. The technology was strong. They had all the business model in place. It's a wee bit complicated as to why it failed, but we'll put it down to finances. And actually, if we go back to the American companies that have folded in the past sort of 5 years, it has usually been to do with cash flow and finances rather than technology. But yes, we need to take a step back and learn and from what we've done, and we need to think long term also about the future. We can't design the chemical processes for the chemicals world and the consumer world of today. We have to think of the world of tomorrow. So we've got to account for electrification, for 3D printing, for AI, for digitalization, for the world of tomorrow. And what will that mean to the petrochemicals world? And then the biomass to chemicals world can step in to meet that petrochemicals world of the future, the one where there's less use for gasoline and diesel, etc.
Anyone else wants
Sorry,
to...
I could go on forever. But...
Anyone else wants to chip in? No. Ian?
No, I think sorry, the picture that I showed right at the start of my presentation had showed that biorefining half of what's happening. And when I look at that, I think it's really interesting. I'm an industrial chemist by training as well. And, when I look at the bit on the left-hand side, which is all the synthetic biology, when I first got into this field, looked like magic. It looked absolutely amazing stuff, and it still does to some extent, although I understand it much better than I did. And that's been really good fun for me as a chemist to understand what can happen at, at that genetic and molecular level inside a cell. And then what I realized when I look at the other side is it's just chemical processing. It's really not, that's the key here, is that there is an enormous amount of value in the chemical industry. That's one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic in Scotland about trying to encourage growth in this area in the Grangemouth region. That's been there for well over 100 years, making chemicals. Initially, actually, as I mentioned in the chat, the reason why it was there is because it was based on West Lothian shale oil, and that's what it used to refine. And then obviously it transitioned to North Sea oil, and now we're looking to think, well, okay, can you transition to a different feedstock? But there's an enormous amount of skill and knowledge. There's 100 years worth of knowledge there that has been passed through, and that's the bit. Not forgetting the lessons of the past. Let's not forget that most of the stuff that we're interested in here has been well established. Biorefining is to a chemist in the lab is purifying. It's purifying a chemical from a horrible mixture. Without destroying the thing you're trying to purify, and I think that would be my comment is make sure we build on that knowledge and experience, and we don't ignore it.
Thanks, Ian. One last question, and not really wanting to open a can of worms, but there's a question around policy, and I'm asking the panel: do you believe that we are moving fast enough net zero wise? I mean, there's this goal around 2050 having net zero carbon emission, but there's concerns from the audience that maybe the policy isn't in place yet to really push that forward.
I think the policies need to be very carefully targeted and very specifically targeted. Net zero in particular is clearly related to carbon emissions, and we need to understand the numbers involved here. And when you start to compare numbers, the chemical industry is relatively small actually compared to our emissions. If you add up all of the carbon in the kind of chemicals industry, excluding plastics, you probably get to about 50 million tons. And then if you add plastics, you can add another 300 or 400 million tons to that, and that's the UK's carbon dioxide emissions. So, if we'll challenge Stephen there. Stephen, well, maybe the people who were writing those articles before, if we can magically convert all of the UK's carbon emissions to all of the chemicals we need using biology, then we can capture the UK's carbon emissions. So the key thing there, there is an opportunity in the chemical sector here. The real one is fuel and energy. That's really where that's the thing to target. And I think there was a comment made. I think someone made a comment about my suggestion about taxation on carbon emissions. I'm actually more interested in the idea of auctioning carbon emissions. Actually, you should buy the privilege to emit. I think that's a much more interesting idea. And there's a great story in one of Tim Harford's books about US power companies being auctioned permits to release sulfur dioxide. And they all said to begin, we can't possibly fit scrubbers onto our power plants to scrub the sulfur dioxide from the coal that we're burning because it'd be too expensive. And so the EPA made them buy permits to emit, and then they decided they weren't going to bother buying the permits because it was so cheap to fit a scrubber, because they were auctioned. And that allows you to set the value of the problem. And I think there's something in that. I don't know that I'm not an economist. I'm a kind of fake economist, much like I'm a fake molecular biologist. I am interested in it and I find it fascinating, but I'm not an expert. But I do think there's something in that.
Ian, I would agree, and I'd build on it in the sense that what you can do is simply inform. First of all, also with tax, if tax is one step too far, then simply remove the subsidy and the support from the petrochemicals industry before we even start talking about tax. That would go a long way. And the other thing is to build what you said about scrubbers, etc. We have experience in the biofuels industry of RIN markets and all sorts of things around the world. But also you can do something like, say, in 2030, the chemicals industry, ideally globally, we will shut down if you emit XYZ, and that doesn't have to be just gases, it can be water pollution, etc., etc. And then everyone knows, and that's set in stone, it politically cannot be changed. And then we have 8 or 9 years to get our acts together. Everyone knows what's coming up. Everyone can do what you were saying about the auctioning and the scrubbers, and it gets us somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I fully agree. I think the issue is, is it?
I'm just please carry on. I'm just preparing.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Are we moving fast enough? Certainly on the fuel side, I don't think so. I think the 2050 is quite a long way away to have a significant impact. And with policy, I think it's really important we start to see these changes, but actually, you know, where are these emissions going? You know, we look globally and where are these emissions likely to be coming from, and where are the policies there, and how can that be incentivized? I must admit, I've been really impressed with the changes over the last few years in India, with the policy I mentioned there, which is actually really driving this forwards, and you can start to see that distill out to other countries where, you know, the impact is massive. It's great what we're doing in the UK, but yeah, there's lots of other places where we need to see that happen as well.
Yeah, maybe I can just chime in as well, just at the end. I think it's industry that has to lead this as well, to be honest. Ian, you told me recently about these amazing sort of carbon emission targets that Unilever have just released to decarbonize their entire chemical product portfolio in healthcare, etc., within the next 10 or 20 years. I think that's incredible, and that's resonated really positively, I think, through the community. So yeah, the impetus has to be in industry to lead that.
Thank you. I think, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I'm sure we could talk about it for another half an hour. I'm passing back to Catherine to say a last few words before we
Great, thank you, Dana. If anyone's question didn't get read out and you would like to ask the panelists, then please do get in touch with Dana and myself, and we can connect you, and you can ask all the questions that you like. I'm sure our panelists will be happy to answer those. So there's just a few more slides from me in terms of information for everybody on the call. So this webinar series is going to continue into November and December. Our next webinar is the 24th of November, and it's around waste polymers as a feedstock. And the final event is on the 15th of December, which Dana has already mentioned, and that will be the brokerage event, where we're really looking at connecting people, partnering up. So it's going to be a really important event. When you sign up, you'll get an email to ask what kind of areas you're interested in, and I really urge you to reply to this. It will only take a few minutes, and it means that we can make that event as valuable as possible to as many people as possible. So please, if you can do that, that would be fantastic. So one last thing, in terms of a really exciting thing that we're working on actually at the KTN, it's around innovation exchange, and we're working in partnership with Croda, and it's all around environmentally sustainable compounds for hair conditioners, which I'm really particularly excited about. So the successful solution providers, whether that be industry or academia, will be given an opportunity to develop and deliver their solution, and they will also receive support from Croda, KTN and the wider Innovate UK network. So really exciting opportunity. So if you want more details and you want to get involved, please follow the link below. You'll get these slides and the recording, so hopefully you'll be able to pick up on that. So yeah, please do get in touch. And if you would like to learn more about the webinar series, there's a few links we have there in terms of the articles, which you can find more information, our capability map, which Dana touched on earlier in her presentation, and any feedback to Dana and myself. If you found this awful, hopefully you didn't. If you found it really good and valuable, any feedback to us would be fantastic using our email addresses there. So I just want to thank you all again for attending. We had a great audience today, nearly 150 people. So we're just going to launch a quick online interactive poll, which my colleague Shelley is going to launch, which is just going to be useful for feedback for us. You know, did we do good? Did we do bad? What else would you have liked to have seen? So if you could just spare 30 seconds to do this poll, that would be amazing. And hopefully our panelists can also fill out this poll as well. And all that's left for me to do is to close the session and thank you all for joining, and just wish you an amazing rest of the day. So thank you to all our speakers and everyone that's been involved in organising this. So thank you all, and I wish you a lovely day. Some waving hands from our panelists there, which is nice.